Hi friends, today we're talking about does, different options on when to breed them, and I'll give you a strategy to use to determine whether your does are ready to breed or not. I'll also be talking about replacement does, expected replacement percentages, and how to use those numbers to reach your goals of herd improvement and growth. You might want to jot down some numbers today, so grab a notebook and pen and let's dive in. Hey friends, welcome to the Get Goatwise podcast. Are you longing to raise goats and other animals for food but don't know where to start? Do you want to be more self-sufficient and less dependent on the grocery store? Do you wish you had a mentor to walk you through raising livestock? Hi, I'm Millie, animal scientist, cattle girl turned goat rancher, co-owner of Dry Creek Livestock, and simple living enthusiast. For 15 years, I've been on a mission to raise all of our own meat, eggs, and dairy. Here, we'll talk about raising goats and other homestead livestock, how to create sustainable animal management systems that actually work, and a bit of off-grid life with kids and livestock. If you're ready to take control of your food supply, raise livestock with confidence, and provide your family with the most nourishing meat, eggs, and dairy available, you're in the right place. Kick off your muck boots, pour a cup of coffee, and let's talk livestock. Hey there! Do you want to hang out with like-minded folks who are also interested in raising their own livestock and seeking self-sufficiency? Inside the free Raising Goats and Homestead Livestock community, you'll get tips on raising goats and other livestock and ideas to increase your self-sufficiency. Join now at bit.ly/getgoatwisecommunity. You can also become an insider and get weekly emails from me with the latest podcast episode, tips on raising goats and other livestock, real-life information about self-sufficiency and living off-grid, and early bird access to special offers. Sign up at bit.ly/getgoatwiseinsider. Here's what's happening on the ranch. Freezing temps are back, so the mornings are crisp and cold, but we're still getting pretty warm in the afternoon, climbing into the 80-degree temps most days. These temperature swings can be hard on the goats that were just weaned, so we're keeping a close eye on them. They've bounced back from weaning and banding, and they're busy growing and playing. We're still moving electric fence daily, and that job is up to me and the younger kids, while Stacy and Sage are away on a fencing job. We're taking the time to get a good look at the kids and estimate where we are on weight and projected market date, and doing a bunch of research and preparations to get these goats sold direct to consumer. Because they are grass-fed only, we'll need to carry them over a little longer than we would if we were taking them to the sale barn, which has some drawbacks and benefits. We'll have more feed into them. It will all be purchased hay because winter is on its way. But we will also be deeper into the highest point of the goat market, especially if we hold them over until Easter. Adjusting my expectations of growth and performance from conventional grain finishing to grass-fed for these goats has been a challenge, but their slower pasture-raised growth may also end up being a huge benefit in market timing. This is a big change, but I'm here for it. Let's talk about does, but first, some terminology. A doe is a female goat, usually over 12 months old, sometimes called a nanny, but if you're talking to a breeder and want to sound like you've done your research, don't use the terms nanny or billy. Doeling. A doeling is a female goat under 1 year of age that has not been bred, also called a doe kid. Yearling does. These are does from 1 to 2 years of age. Replacement does. This is a term used to describe doelings or yearling does that are retained for breeding. They will replace older does that are retiring or any death loss you have in the doe herd. In larger herds, when you've reached your target herd size, typical replacement numbers are around 15% of your current herd. While you're still growing your herd, it will be much larger, but not above 25% while continuing to improve herd quality. Let's use a herd of 100 does for an easy example. We'll assume 150% weaned kid crop, so that's 150 kids. 50% being does, so that's 75 doe kids. As a rule of thumb with does, you divide them into thirds by quality, retain the top third, sell the middle third for breeding stock, and the bottom third go for meat or pets, but not for breeding. In this case, 1/3 of the does is 25 head, which conveniently explains the 25% calculation based on our example herd size of 100. When we talk about retaining the top third, you only keep as many of that third as you need for replacements. These numbers shift based on where you are at with your experience and herd quality. If you're just getting started, you'll probably want to be closer to 15% if you don't really know your herd yet, but if you're familiar with the genetics you purchased and you're ready to grow, go ahead with 25% replacements to get that herd size growing. In the first couple of years, your herd size may actually decrease because you need to cull ruthlessly. Culling, that's C-U-L-L-I-N-G, is removing animals from the herd. This helps you develop a herd that is productive, low maintenance, and fun to own, so you'll want to sell open does, which means does that don't breed up, does that are poor mothers, or just does that are miserable to be around. When you retain more than 25% of your current herd number, you may move in the wrong direction genetically if you're still trying to improve your herd. If you have reached the ideal goat in your herd, you can retain and sell a higher percentage of doe kids for breeding purposes. In our first year of commercial meat goats, we culled everything that didn't bring in a kid at weaning. We started with 39 does, culled 6, which was 15%. We weaned 39 kids, and that number was low because all of our does were kidding as yearlings, so there were lots of singles. We retained 14 doe kids, which was 36% replacement rate and too high for genetic improvement. But our goal was to grow the herd, so we made exceptions and kept some does that we probably shouldn't have. It turned out okay, but we learned some lessons. The quote, "go slow to go fast," definitely applies here. We hadn't really dialed in our goals for the meat goat herd, so we were kind of just producing goats, and by sheer luck, it turned out okay. But don't do what we did. Make a plan before you start, and then follow it. By year 2, we had some solid goals and started aiming for them. Does will reach puberty and have their first heat cycle at 4 to 12 months of age. That's a big range, and it's affected by health, breed, season of birth, and feed and nutrition. Does that are given supplemental feed will likely mature faster, while those that are not will be slower growing and may mature later. The big question is, at what age can you breed a doe? There are a lot of opinions on this, and we've tried about all of them. One method is to breed does to kid at 12 months old. This is common in show goats where the financial investment is high, and waiting to breed later slows genetic improvement and the perceived cost is higher. Commercial meat goat breeders may expose doelings to a buck at 7 months old to kid at 1 year old, but expectations are low. If they breed up, it's a bonus. If they don't, that's okay too. I've seen a shift toward waiting until does are near 1 year old before breeding, which has them kidding at 16 to 18 months of age. Again, this is common in show goats where there's pressure to decrease the generation interval, and especially for those breeders who sell nationwide and can hit markets for shows that are not in their local season. So it doesn't matter as much when their kids are born. For commercial producers that work on an annual cycle, using this timing complicates the regular breeding schedule because the first-time does will be kidding about a month before bucks go in with the rest of the does. So you'll either skip a season with the first-time does or have late kids and be playing catch-up for a couple years. The other option is to skip that first year of production altogether and breed the does to kid at 2 years old. The pros are less dystocia and mothering problems, staying on a regular annual breeding program with all the does together, and rebreeding for their 3-year-old year is less of a problem, and there may be increased productive lifespan in does that do not kid as yearlings, but there hasn't been much research in this area in goats. I'll talk about this more in a minute. The cons are slower genetic improvement and more investment in doe development as you're feeding them for an extra year before they produce any offspring. When we first started with show goats, we bred them to kid as yearlings. After a couple years of dystocia and mothering problems, we decided to continue breeding them to kid as yearlings, but use a different buck for easier kidding. In cattle terms, we'd call this a low birth weight bull or a heifer bull. So we used a Spanish buck on all the doelings, and it made a huge difference. What we found was that the does who had an easier first kidding were better moms, not only in that kidding, but in subsequent births also. The does who had a difficult first kidding had a hard time mothering the first time, and often second and third births as well. Using the Spanish buck on the show does was a big success in our program, and we continued to do that until we sold that herd earlier this year. On the commercial meat goat side of things, we just didn't have nearly the challenges at kidding that we'd experienced in the show goats, and that's exactly what you'd expect. We continued to expose doelings to a buck to kid at 1 year old, but we didn't have expectations that they would breed up, and we considered any kids born out of yearling does a bonus, and that worked pretty well for us. Over the years, we still saw plenty of difficult births and mothering challenges in the yearling does. And because we kept detailed records, we could look at what was happening with the does who did not breed up and kid as yearlings, but instead had their first kids at 2 years old. Those does rarely needed assistance at kidding, and they were much better moms. Around this same time, I was reading research in beef cattle that showed extended longevity in cows who were not bred to calve as 2-year-olds, which would be equivalent to does kidding as yearlings. Essentially, the data showed that heifers that didn't calve until they were 3 years old would have 1 to 3 more calves on the end of their expected lifespan versus the heifers that calved as 2-year-olds. I can't remember the reference for that study, but I'll try to find it again and link it in the show notes when I do. As this same scenario played out over 3 or 4 years, we decided to stop exposing doelings to the buck and instead wait to breed until they were 19 months old to kid at 2 years old. This year, our first group of does that were intentionally delayed on breeding will go in with the buck in December. They spent the summer growing and developing instead of trying to raise kids while still growing themselves, and they look really good. I'm excited to see how they perform next June. It'll take years to see the full impact of this decision, but for now, I feel really good about it, and I think it's what's best for the does. But time will tell. Back to the original question, at what age can you breed a doe? If you only have a few goats and you're not tied to a production calendar like we are, rather than age, I think a better measurement of when to breed does is a percentage of mature weight. The general recommendation is not to breed does until they have reached 60 to 70% of their expected mature weight. That's very dependent on feed and genetics, but if you meet that parameter before breeding, you'll be much more likely to have easier kidding and better mothering in your first-time does. I hope this helps you make a successful breeding plan for your does and create a strategy for replacement does to meet your goals of improvement and/or herd growth. If you have any questions, you can send me an email or come on over to the free community and start a conversation. You can find my email and a link to the community in the show notes. Hey there, thanks for listening today. I'm so glad you're here. If this episode helped you or encouraged you in some way, share the link with your homesteading friends. And if you really want to help me out, click on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and a review. You can connect with me on Instagram or email linked in the show notes, and meet me back here soon for more Get Goat Wise.